Welcome back into the WCNC Live Impact News Studio. I am Sports Director Nick Carboni, getting you ready as we have all month for the NBA Draft. It tips off Wednesday night with Round 1. It's a two-day event this year, and we have special coverage for Round 1 starting at 7 o'clock right here on WCNC+. In the meantime, as I mentioned, we have been discussing and dissecting the Hornets draft strategy with that number 4 overall pick. We've had guests every single week, and here in studio with me now is Walker Mehl from Locked On Hornets. Walker, thanks for joining me, and you may be our tallest guest. We did have to adjust the seat to be more even with the microphone, so I appreciate it.
Me adjusting the seat really just looked a lot like me pressing the lever and going as far down as possible. That's what it looked like, so I appreciate it. I mean, I kind of had to do it myself, but that's fine.
Now, Ace Bailey said he was 6'10", but apparently he's 6'7", so what can we get an official height on Walker Mehl?
6'7" with shoes, baby. Yeah, like 6'5.5" without shoes, but 6'7" with shoes, so I'm just going to roll with that from now on. My driver's license is wrong as of right now.
All right, let's get into some of the headlines that we're hearing really today, just a few days before Round 1 of the NBA Draft. First, obviously, let's talk about the finals. It went the distance to 7 games. Tyrese Halliburton gets hurt early yesterday. Kind of stinks we didn't really get to see it play out for the full 7-game stretch as he missed most of Game 7, Oklahoma City Thunder winning. Does having 2 teams in mid-sized TV markets inform at all how you view the future of the Charlotte Hornets when it comes to contending for a championship in a similar market?
Yeah, yes, because of the way that the CBA is structured. So now that you have the 2 aprons and the second apron essentially serving as a hard cap, I think it's going to be harder for some of the teams with really rich owners to just say, you know what, that's fine. I'll go ahead and pay all this money in luxury tax, where the second apron is really punitive in that sort of way, where you're seeing a team like Memphis decide that we don't want to pay monster salaries to any more than 2 players, and that's why we're going to trade Desmond Bane to Orlando, and we're going to just welcome all those first-round picks coming our way. So I think in that case, it might be beneficial to some of these owners that aren't really rich and are out of or in bigger markets, right? So maybe that levels the playing field a little bit more. But really, you have to make smart decisions, man. Like, that's what it comes down to. It starts with the draft. You got to draft right. You got to make shrewd moves in free agency. You got to finagle the cap the best way that you can. There's just a lot of basketball decision-making that you need to hit on, regardless of whether you're in a big market or a small market. Yes, the gap is probably closer than it's been, especially with the second apron serving as a hard cap, but it comes down to making smart decisions.
So Rick Schnall, Gabe Plotkin, and then Jeff Peterson have all said the phrase, and we've heard it many times, and we'll hear it many more times. They want to be the premier franchise in the NBA. So with that in mind, making smart decisions, we've had a limited sample size for ownership and this front office to draw from in terms of the moves they have made to try to get to that stated goal. I don't need you to go through every single move, but what have been your impressions a year and a half to 2 years in with all of them together?
I don't know if I've disagreed with any of them.
Okay.
I'll say that. There's not been a move that they've made since new ownership took over, quasi took over, and then officially took over, where I felt they were doing something incorrect. I have not disagreed a ton with any of the moves. Honestly, the one that's been up in the air the most was Jeff Peterson's first ever first-round draft selection in Tidjane Salaun. I was more just caught off guard by it. We talked about so many different prospects. Tidjane Salaun was not really
Google was active in Charlotte last draft night.
We had one report, 4 p.m. on draft day, that, hey, watch out for the Hornets interested in Tidjane Salaun. And then 4.5 hours later, he is the newest member of the Charlotte Hornets. And so then we're all left scrambling, trying to figure out all the Tidjane takes and all the stats and what we could find up. But that was really it. That's the only move that I probably would have gone in a different direction. I'm not here to tell you that that was a terrible mistake. I agreed with the trade that they made with Terry Rozier, clearly defining a pathway they're going to take, trading P.J. Washington, who I was a big fan of, but they traded him for a nice first-round pick. It looks less nice with Dallas being rewarded Cooper Flagg in the draft lottery, but even still, you're getting a first-round pick, and that made a ton of sense to me. So are they making the right decisions? I can't tell you that I've disagreed with a lot of the decisions that they've made so far.
I think you would probably consider this an incorrect decision if it happens Wednesday night at number 4. But there's been buzz here 48 hours before the draft that Jeremiah Fears, a 6'2" point guard, could be in play for the Hornets. I don't know if you'll like this. Your partner Doug would love this. Will Hornets fans be crying tears for Fears on Wednesday night?
Oh, he would. I love it. I love it. Yes, Doug would love that as well. Tears for Fears is great. I would be among those crying if Fears is the pick. I haven't really thought about it because we just haven't talked about him being a target for Charlotte.
Yeah.
And I haven't really thought of what would be the worst case scenario. That's the one I least like out of all of them. Even Ace Bailey, who I've not been all that in on for the Hornets to take, I understand the vision, and I would understand them taking as a guy as talented as Ace Bailey. But Jeremiah Fears, as much as I've advocated for putting another guard alongside LaMelo and that actually benefiting him more than it being a detriment to him, Jeremiah Fears is a high usage guy that can't shoot very well, at least 28% last year at Oklahoma. If you feel like the shot is coming along, then okay. But even with him being a walking paint touch, just getting into the paint as much as he wants to, that's something that this Hornets team doesn't necessarily have. I don't see LaMelo and Jeremiah Fears coexisting alongside each other. Now, you could ask another question. How much does fit really matter? If this is a team that won 19 games last year, should you be drafting at all based off of fit? Charles Lee runs a three-point heavy scheme, I think, within his perfect scenario. That's the vision. So, okay, Charles Lee and Jeff Peterson are on the same page. They look to be aligned on basketball philosophy. Do you want to sacrifice a talented player because he doesn't fit the Charles Lee system, who it's a coach that you expect to have here for quite some time, but it's not a guarantee. And so the fit, the truth is it's always going to overlap talent alongside fit. But I think Jeremiah Fears is one of those guys where there are too many other prospects in this range that I'd rather have over the Oklahoma point guard.
That brings up a great point about where the Hornets are on this timeline of what ownership and Jeff Peterson are trying to do, because it almost simultaneously feels right now that it's, no, we have a squad when healthy good enough to get to the play-in, but also drafting a guy last year in Tidjane Salaun that is 4 or 5 years away from becoming, achieving his full potential. Now, looking back at that draft, we may have to take that into account, what draft he was selected in. It was a lot of big swings in the draft.
Yeah.
So where are they? How do we talk
important context. Yeah. Where are they right now? I think the Hornets have been dealt such a bad hand when it comes to injury luck that so much of this is up in the air. So much of it is uncertain. I don't know if we should be speaking about anybody being a core 4 of this team. We tried to get it going last year. And
it's like fetch. Stop trying to make core 4 happen.
The Hornets were even running away with it, and then they traded one of the members of the core 4, and then he's back on the team. And so, is he still a member? Like, how do we feel about Mark? That whole situation was really awkward. But to your point, where are we right now? I don't even know if the Hornets know where we are. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to build smart decision after smart decision. They're trying to pile them up and see where they end up and let the cards fall as they may. And I do think that, especially in a wide-open East, given Tyrese Halliburton's year-long injury in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, which is extremely unfortunate, but what it does do is it opens up the Eastern Conference in a way that you didn't expect and was already pretty wide open even if Tyrese Halliburton didn't suffer a year-long injury. So is the East going to be bad enough for the Hornets to really sneak into a top 6 spot in the postseason? I still doubt that. But now could they get into the play-in tournament, win a game, win 2 games, and then get to the playoffs that way? I think that is a possibility as long as everybody stays healthy. But you got to hit your draft picks, and we just don't know if they did that with Tidjane Salaun. You have guys, I think, that would all go above Tidjane Salaun in all of these draft scenarios, right? VJ Edgecombe, Kon Knueppel, Ace Bailey, go down the list. I think all of them in the same class, all of those guys would be selected before Tidjane would. That's just the context of last year's draft.
There's more polish in this year's
much
draft.
more polish.
Known commodities coming out of colleges.
And questions about all of them, for sure, but much more polish with all of those prospects, more so than Tidjane. So I think the timeline is they're still trying to figure it out, especially with the guys that they have.
And part of figuring it out is having your starting lineup on opening night be out there more than 6 times together in a season.
Unreal.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just been snake bit. So,
Yeah.
all right, other big piece of news on Monday, Shams Charania, listen, anytime he says anything about your team, you got to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
So on ESPN was asked if the Hornets would consider a deal for LaMelo Ball. And he basically said, like, they would consider a big deal. They didn't have any concrete reporting that, yes, they're shopping LaMelo Ball, or yes, offers have been made. To me, that's just common sense, right? I mean, you have a guy that has missed a lot of time and is on a big contract, and you have a new regime who did not draft him and is still trying to evaluate whether he's the future. If you get a sweetheart deal for LaMelo Ball, you consider it. I'm not sure they'll get that sweetheart deal, like enough to make it worth it, just given the injury history.
I'm not sure it's worth it for the Hornets either.
Yeah.
I guess, okay, when you're trying to assess all of the risks, is it worth having LaMelo Ball on your team another year, or is it worth trading LaMelo Ball for maybe 80 to 75 cents on the dollar, something short of what's equal value? Would you rather do that to the tune of, I don't know what that would look like, in my opinion, probably something like 2 first and a protected first on top of it, so 3 altogether. I don't know what that would look like. What I do know is that I'd probably rather just have LaMelo Ball on my team. I'm a fan of LaMelo. I think putting him alongside the right players brings a different kind of LaMelo to the table. You saw him reach his only All-Star game, his second year in the league, and that's when he had what we would call adequate talent around him. I think that's when you had some vets. You had Terry Rozier, you had Gordon Hayward that was still seeing some important minutes, and they were above 500. When LaMelo was an All-Star, they were above 500, and they had veterans all around him, and that made sense to me. And I think that's the kind of player you want to see from LaMelo, where, yeah, the usage rate is through the roof. He's got the ball in his hands constantly, but I think it's out of necessity more so than it is purely out of choice. So, okay, what are you getting for LaMelo? I think people would probably try to lowball you. And the other interesting thing about trading LaMelo is, if you were to ask me the teams that would most like to have LaMelo on their squad a year ago, I would have told you a bunch of teams that have just made moves within the last 6 months. I would have told you San Antonio would be a team to keep an eye out for, except they went and got De'Aaron Fox on top of already drafting Stephon Castle, and they're going to draft Dylan Harper. So they're out of the LaMelo sweepstakes. So then you move to Houston, where, okay, they did just get rid of Jalen Green, and now they welcome Kevin Durant, but they just made their big trade. I can't imagine that they're going to trade for Kevin Durant and then get off of some of the pieces that helped them reach the postseason the way they did last year in order to go get LaMelo. That's too much of an identity change for them. So then you go to Orlando, which I always thought was the team that made the most sense, and they just gave up 4 first-rounders to go get Desmond Bane. So all the teams that I thought that made the most sense going after LaMelo, they all made their moves. I don't know the other team that's going to do it.
Well, according to Chandler Parsons and LeVar Ball, it's the Clippers.
Right. LeVar Ball is going to tell you that it's the Clippers, and he wants his sons to be in L.A. And I get it. He wants Lonzo. He wants all the Ball brothers to be in L.A. And that makes sense for him being out there for sure. But, yeah, I don't know what other team makes the most sense outside of those 3 where the LaMelo, the interested teams or the teams interested in LaMelo, that's kind of dried up now. So all signs point to him just being with the Hornets another year.
Talking to Walker Mehl from Locked On Hornets 2 days ahead of the NBA draft. Again, our draft night special on WCNC Plus tips off at 7 o'clock. We will take you all the way up to the draft, all the way through the Hornets pick and beyond for analysis. And, it's going to be really interesting when the draft tips off at 8 o'clock, Walker, because we know the first 2 picks. They're about as guaranteed as can be at this point. Cooper Flagg to the Mavericks, and then Dylan Harper, number 2, to the San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, the first pivot point is Philadelphia at 3, right in front of the Hornets. And you are on the side. We've had people in this chair say, absolutely got to take Ace Bailey if he's there. We've had folks like yourself who, would rather go a different direction.
Right.
As if you're sitting there as a Hornets fan watching the draft on Wednesday night, and the Sixers come on the board at 3, are you hoping they solve the Ace Bailey problem for you and take him?
Absolutely. I'm hoping that they solve. Now, I'll tell you what I'm hoping for more than that. I'm hoping for VJ Edgecombe to be there. That's my biggest hope. If he's there at 4, then you take him. Done.
Yeah.
Okay? We don't need to entertain trade backs. We don't need to do anything like that. Just take VJ Edgecombe and call it a day. But if Philly does take VJ Edgecombe, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that Ace Bailey is available. I would look at trading back now, and you've got a few teams that might be interested in Ace, and then you could still get one of those other shooting guards like Trey Johnson or Kon Knueppel that fit-wise in that range of most talented prospects as well. They fit pretty seamlessly. All you got to do is just put them right in between LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, and you got yourself what you hope to have in another core 4, core 5. Hell, let's get crazy here.
Yeah,
let's
5 would be great.
Let's have
a whole
core,
starting lineup.
It doesn't rhyme, but let's have maybe we can go Fab 5 for alliteration if we can't find a rhyming word for it. But I would be fine having a talented 5 with the shooting guard going right in between LaMelo and Brandon. So the teams that might be interested, Washington at 6, if they wanted to guarantee taking Ace Bailey, they would move up a couple of spots, and then the Hornets would just take the best of Trey Johnson or Kon Knueppel. You'd be guaranteed one of those guys with in mind Washington trading up for Ace. Then it gets a little dicey if you're talking about New Orleans at 7, Brooklyn at 8.
Is that too far back to go if you want a shooting guard, which
I think that
makes the most sense?
That's about the limit that I would go. I'm not going back to Toronto at 9, which might have some interesting options there if they were willing to part ways with an RJ Barrett, an Abaji, some picks. But I'd rather just go with Brooklyn. Now, Brooklyn's interesting because Cam Johnson could be available. And so the Hornets have to – that whole timeline thing we were just talking about, while the Hornets don't know, they have to figure out if if a swap for an 8 and Cam Johnson, while also giving up, I don't know, another first, 2 other firsts for Cam and number 8 while switching that out. I don't know what it would look like. But Cam being a veteran prize, they got to figure out if they really want to try to win in what is a wide open East and put another talented piece alongside some of your younger players to truly figure out what you have in this core as long as they stay healthy. So those are the decisions ahead. But the biggest thing I'm pulling for is the Hornets to have right to first refusal to VJ Edgecombe. I want him there, and I'd rather the Hornets take him, but I at least want the Hornets to have that option.
With Ace Bailey, is it the project nature of his timeline, like that it could be a few years before he achieves that potential, or is it him being able to achieve that potential at all?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I don't think he fits really well with this team. I'm willing to overlook fit if I really liked the player. But I think with Ace, he takes 50% of his shots from the mid-range. That's not how Charles Lee wants to coach his offense. Brandon Miller already, he had a dip in mid-range shot attempts this year, but he was still in the 67th percentile NBA wide, and Hornets fans still thought it was too low for Brandon, right? Like, Brandon is still one of the guys taking more mid-range jumpers than a lot of other wing players in the NBA, and we still thought it was too little, or a lot of Hornets fans did. So imagine Ace, who shot 50% of his shots at Rutgers within that mid-range game. It doesn't mean that he can't turn his game into something else. It's just that's what that guy is comfortable playing right now. I like somebody at 6'8" that can get to the rim quite a bit, and he just didn't in college. He settled. So is it purposeful as to why he's shooting a lot of those mid-range jumpers? Or is he settling because he can't get to the rim because of a lack of handle, because he's not strong enough, because smaller defenders get up under his hip and don't allow him to get to the spots that he truly wants to go to? I think, especially with the lack of feel passing-wise, I think one thing that I've missed out on when I've missed on prospects is a feel. I've either undervalued it or overvalued athleticism with other guys. And Ace Bailey, the assist to turnover percentage, even with that Rutgers offense calling for him to score more, the assist to turnover percentage is so bad. He just doesn't make other players better, like I think these other guys have of an opportunity to do. And the three-point shot isn't there. I just have too many questions. Like, I see the talent. If they take him, I'd be interested to see how it works. But there are too many other guys here that I'd rather take, like Trey Johnson, like VJ Edgecombe, like Kon Knueppel, over Ace Bailey, where I'm probably just out on the Ace business here in Charlotte.
All right. Well, I mean, overvaluing athleticism, VJ Edgecombe may be the best athlete in this range of the draft. But he has good intangibles and IQ.
Yeah.
Brings defensive intensity that's going to help this roster immediately. But picking him at 4, do you worry you're sacrificing offensive potential, or what do you think he could grow into on that end?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a big question about all of these guys. For instance, if they had their chance at Dylan Harper, I'd be ecstatic. I mean, I just think his game is so polished. But VJ Edgecombe, I question the handle a little bit. I question the shooting a tiny bit. But I do think that what VJ possesses are all skills that can either be corrected. I think he's got a lot of coachable weaknesses right now. And so because of that and all of the intangibles that you mentioned, that's why I'm taking VJ there. So the athleticism is great. I think the defense, while there's some things he needs to work on, I think all of it's coachable. I think he has the right athleticism to deal with all of it. I think the NBA game is actually going to benefit him more than the college game, too, with all the spacing. And so maybe you're a little worried about the handle and some tight spaces, but I think the NBA game is going to help him a lot there. And so for some of those reasons, especially with what we saw in the finals, just having a whole bunch of dudes that can guard, that can be physical. We don't have that guy on our team right now, not on the perimeter, that is both an offensive and defensive threat. I think that's why I'm leaning more towards drafting the Baylor guard.
If the 76ers do select your favorite player at that spot, VJ Edgecombe, I mean, do you have to draft Ace Bailey and trade him? Like, is he that valuable? Or do you let it slide? And so then Trey Johnson, Kon Knueppel, are those the guys that would be in play next year?
Yep, those are the guys. Yeah. So I think my options right now, it'd be, if I had it my way, it'd be VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, I think Kon Knueppel.
The thing with Kon Knueppel is everybody's cool with it.
Yeah.
But then you say at 4, and it's like, you get kind of 50-50
Right. So if you wanted to draft Ace and then trade, which basically you would be selecting Ace Bailey with the intent to trade back anyway, which means you already have a deal in place to be very SGA-esque. It would be a little painful to bring up now, considering he had one of the best seasons of all time. But it would be SGA-esque. Yeah, you don't have to answer your question. You don't have to draft Ace and then trade back. But I think Trey Johnson would be my next option if VJ is off the board.
I mean, you talk about offensive potential. The guy oozes it from Texas.
Yeah.
We did have somebody in your chair, young Terrence Oglesby, evoke the name Kobe Bryant when he talked about Trey Johnson because of the measurables and because of the shot selection.
How much steam did that? Well, I get aggregated as much as he did.
I told him we wouldn't aggregate him, and then I had to go fight everybody in the newsroom because they wanted to aggregate him.
All right, so I gotta have a Michael Jordan comparison.
Okay.
Let me think about it.
Okay, yeah, right.
I gotta find it.
Yeah. So sounds like you'd be disappointed if VJ Edgecombe was off the board, but I mean, how excited would you be about adding Trey Johnson to this system and this roster?
No, I like Trey a lot. I think there's a lot to like with Trey offensively, especially. So the movement shooting is real special with him. If you're comparing Kon Knueppel and Trey Johnson as shooters to one another, Trey Johnson is the better movement shooter, coming off of screens, moving with fluidity, having more athleticism than Kon, not being as big and strong as Knueppel, but having the athleticism. And I'll tell you what I really like about Trey. The handle is really nice with him. It's the best handle of anybody that we're really talking about. Ace, Kon, VJ, in that range. Trey's the guy. And I do value that. I think it's really hard to teach at the next level. So perhaps I'm speaking a little bit out of both sides out of my mouth with VJ and Trey, but I value the Trey defense. I think on that end of the floor, I think he's going to be very, very good. And so I value that more than I value what Trey could be as an offensive threat. But I do value it, right? I think Trey, as a solo creator, I think that there are enough passing chops with him. I don't think they're great, but I think that there's enough. And the finishing at the rim stuff with Trey is interesting. So if you look at what he does at the rim, he actually shoots a decent percentage once he gets to the cup. And it's just that he doesn't get there a lot. But he shoots well enough. You get there, and he shoots. Well, actually, it's not been very good. I'm sorry. He doesn't shoot. He doesn't get there. He doesn't shoot all that well at the rim. But there are moments where I feel like he can play off of 2 feet and work on that a little bit more so. So that's the stuff.
He's got the size. I mean, he's about 6'5".
Yeah.
He's got a pretty good wingspan.
Yeah. All right. So with Trey, he shoots well at the rim enough. I apologize. I'm all over the place. With Trey Johnson, He shoots in the 70th percentile at the rim. He just doesn't get there a whole lot.
Okay.
That's the fine-tuning.
Getting
here.
there in the NBA is going to be something to work on.
Which, to me, I think he'll be able to do, again, with that spacing.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that spacing, I think that benefits VJ. I think that benefits Trey quite a bit at the next level. And I can see why so many people are big fans of Trey. I'd be happy with him.
Regardless of value, if Kon Knueppel comes out Wednesday and is coming from Durham to Charlotte, what does he bring to this Hornets team immediately? Because it just seems like there's not one.
Yeah.
Well, the shooting is great. Other than that, there's not like one great thing, but it's a lot of. He checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, I think with Kon, the shooting is great. I think the decision making is fantastic. I think when you use him as a ball handler in the pick and roll, his decision making, particularly when he gets into the paint, is very good. I think you saw that a lot on display here in Charlotte during the ACC tournament. When Cooper Flagg went down and he was your primary ball handler, they had to create their offense through him. He was the guy that was throwing a bunch of lobs to Malawach, and he was throwing those lobs at the exact right moment. He would kind of probe in the paint, dribble. Big man gets away from Malawach, and that's when he throws it. And he throws it with enough accuracy, enough height that his guy can go get it. And there were countless plays like that in the ACC tournament. And there is just great 2 feet play with him, real controlled. I do think he's a really good passer. You worry about the athleticism with him, specifically defensively. I'm not totally worried about him getting to his spots offensively because there's ways that you can dictate with pace and strength, and he can absorb a lot of contact, both offensively and defensively. But at the combine, after testing a little later than everybody else because of an injury, the lane agility numbers were really poor, like down there with the slowest of centers at the NBA combine, which is not good.
Yeah.
He's going to get hunted offensively. I don't think he's weak. I don't think he's soft, right? I think he's good in those regards, which helps you get over some of those lack of athletic traits. But I do worry about it. People are going to pick on him, and it's all about whether he can hang in some of those situations where you don't have to hide him constantly. They're going to do it early, but that's the Kon scouting report. But I'd be fine with him if he's the pick. He'd be my third choice of the shooting guards. VJ first, Trey second. But I wouldn't walk away angry.
It doesn't seem like we're going to have a repeat of last year where somebody, gets tweeted about at 4 o'clock, like you said, and 4 hours later they pick him and everybody's trying to figure out who Tidjane Salaun is. Like, it feels like they will come off at least a relatively short list of players we've talked about. But it feels like operating at 4, even with a trade back, the Hornets are, it might be a sign that either something went wrong or they just really fell in love with somebody that we're not talking about. Yeah. And I guess because they've been so secretive about the pre-draft process, in theory, I guess that could happen like it did last year. I know you guys you guys on Locked On Hornets have had fun with this, but like, who are there some names out there that you're just like, sure, maybe it's Jakachonis.
Yeah,
maybe it's Murray Boyle.
That's the guy. Yeah. That's the guy. It's so there have been some rumblings about the Hornets being interested in Jakachonis out of Illinois. He's a 6'6" guard. I actually like his handle a lot as well. So he's got good size in the backcourt. The shooting numbers aren't great with him. There are some historical shooting numbers with other guys that turned out to be great shooters, especially off of the dribble, where he's in that same camp. And so there's hope that he could project to be a decent shooter. He does get to the paint and finish very well once he gets near the cup. And so I think that's something that you like. He's a good passer. He turns it over a lot. Yeah. So that's something that is going to have to fix itself. But I do like the vision with him. He's a scary pull-the-trigger guy for me, too. I've gone with the Don Cheadle Ocean's 11 example where I'm pulling the trigger, but I'm protecting myself. Like, oh, God, this might be an explosion. I don't know if it's going to be great. But I do think Jakachonis has enough talent, tantalizing enough for me to, if all those other guys are off the board, I'd go ahead and take him. But he's the guy. Like, really, if he's the one most outside of the other shooting guards we've discussed so much, he's the guy that I think would most likely end up as a Hornet if they're off the table.
Which then leads us to a massive conversation about the other tall point guard with handle. What would happen in that situation?
Right.
It's a low chance, but what would happen in that situation?
So I am one that thinks LaMelo is a lot more malleable of a basketball player than given credit for.
Yeah.
I think he can share the backcourt with another basketball player that can be not a primary ball handler, because that's always going to be LaMelo, but another guy that can take on that role. One, LaMelo has missed a ton of basketball games. So when LaMelo's off the floor, this offense is in shambles. And it would be nice to not have to rely on LaMelo's ankles to hold up, because they just haven't over the last couple of years. It would be nice to have another decent enough option of a guy who can lead your offense, and that's where Jonas would come in, because he's a high-usage guy over at Illinois. I think LaMelo's off-ball shooting is good enough to where you can run some plays for him off-ball, have him coming off of screens, and give him some shots, some perimeter shots in the catch-and-shoot variety. And Jonas, I imagine, okay, you swing it over to one end of the court, the defense reacts, and then you have a skip pass to Jonas who can attack a closeout because they're late rotating. Like, I think there are ways that you can make it work, and he does get to the cup, which is something that this team just doesn't have nearly as much outside of Miles, but not in the backcourt. You don't have that skill set in the backcourt. I think they could play alongside each other more than a Jeremiah Fears if he was the fourth pick, right? The fifth pick, sixth pick, if you trade back and get him. I like his game paired with LaMelo a little bit more so than the Oklahoma point guard.
Well, retroactive shout out to Jeb for the correct spelling of Jonas on the lower third. It didn't fit at first, but he got there. Jeb got it through that one. I only talked about him just so we could see. I was testing Jeb there.
You got to keep the producers on their toes.
A couple more minutes with Walker Mehl from Locked On Hornets. Is a Mark Williams trade inevitable? Does it feel that way to you? It's being discussed a lot, but not by anybody that's making that actual decision.
I don't think it's inevitable. I think they traded Mark Williams last year because the offer was too good to pass up. I kept referring to it as 120 cents on the dollar. I think you got more than what you would normally expect for Mark in return. So they felt like it was too good to pass up with the trade deadline, breeding urgency the way that it does. I think that's why they decided to sign off on that deal. And the Lakers decided, you know what, we're going to fail this physical, whether there was legitimately something to point to or this was gamesmanship. They got cold feet. It honestly looks like the latter. But whatever it was, it's why I put the Hornets in a tough spot because, okay, it's not like we were actively shopping Mark Williams, but you made an offer because of Luka Doncic wanting a lob threat like he had in Dallas with Derek Lively. He wanted to go back to Durham and get another Duke big man and Mark Williams. And so because the Lakers under the Bus regime have always made star wishes priority, Luka, the new star in town, we want to welcome you with open arms. What do you want? You want a lob threat? Sure. We'll give up these first-round picks to go get them. And then they realized, there's not a lot of fanfare surrounding this deal. We did give up a couple of firsts, an unprotected first-round pick. We're just going to fail his physical, even if it's not the back, which is what they said. What is it then? It's just not the back. It's just not the back. Okay, right? That's why the Hornets were so frustrated by it. I don't think it's inevitable that they would trade Mark. I think if you got something of equal value, perhaps. If you got something more than equal value, clearly they've shown that's when they would trade him. But they're not just going to move off of him for the sake of moving off of him. There's no reason to do it. Mark is playing. He's a useful center. He's not a perfect center, but he's useful. So there's no reason to, move off of Mark for anything less than what you think he's worth. And so, no, I don't think it's inevitable at all. But they've clearly shown we have traded him before. We can trade him again as long as it's for the right offer.
I feel like it's a yearly obligation to ask if Miles Bridges will be traded on draft night.
It is. It's a yearly obligation. Now you can check that box off in your contract. Will he be traded? I don't think so. One thing about the Hornets right now, man, they're championing him as a leader. Yeah. The players are, the team is. If you look at their social media account, some of just the random content that some of these team accounts will, bring up or construct for whatever, right? For whatever engagement, just all teams do it. Miles is in there quite a bit, and I think that they celebrate him as that leader. if you look at what the players will say about him, Mark Williams, LaMelo Ball is clearly very close to him. They are championing him as that guy. Now, it doesn't mean that they won't trade him, too, for the right offer.
Yeah.
The contract is valuable. Yeah. It's a declining value.
Very team-friendly.
Very team-friendly. Only 2 more years left on that deal. It descends again, so I forget what it is. I think it's like 25,
it could be
23.
A piece it could be a deadline piece. For sure.
It very much so could be a deadline piece. He was a deadline piece this past year. So maybe with a year and a half left on his deal, it becomes that much more valuable for a guy that is a useful player.
Yeah.
And dove for a bunch of loose basketballs. I thought cleaned up a lot of his defensive mistakes. He still is a guy that gets to the rack a decent amount, even if the shooting comes and goes, and considering the percentages, it goes more than it's there for you. I do think Miles is clearly a useful basketball player to have. Do I think they're going to trade him? I don't think they're going to trade him before draft night, on draft night. I think they'd probably hold on to him at least until the trade deadline. But, yeah, it's always a possibility. Next year, if he's on the team and I'm in this chair again, you're going to have to ask me.
I will.
It's a worthwhile question.
It's written down, actually, on the desk.
It's a worthwhile question. I was wondering what that was. It's a worthwhile question.
All right, we'll wrap it up with this. We've been talking about the first round, but, folks, the second round has its own day now. We got to give it some shine. And the Hornets have some interesting picks there. They have 33 and 34 back-to-back, third and fourth picks in the second round. Them sitting there consecutively that early in the draft makes me think there's no way they're picking in both of those spots. Yeah, those are very valuable.
They were in this situation not too long ago when they drafted. They had, 4 picks. There's just not enough roster spots. It doesn't make sense. I think they had 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
they had a lot of second rounders, and eventually they got to a point where they were either trading them, they were procrastinating, kicking that pick down the road, whatever. I think that is in play here. I like some of the centers that might drop.
Yeah.
I love Maxime Reynaud out of Stanford, which ACC country now, baby.
I mean, that Stanford-Cal game, I was making so much fun of that matchup and then was like, oh, this game is actually amazing. Stojakovic's kid, I mean, it was amazing.
Well, now.
Reynaud has been good. He was good all year.
He was a 20-point-per-game scorer. Yeah. He can get it done in a lot of different ways offensively. You're not drafting him for defense, but really skilled, man. Awesome basketball player to watch. So I think I don't think he's going to go in the lottery, but I think he's going to be a top 20 pick. So I don't think you're going to have your chance at him. If he were to fall to 23, 24, something like that, then I'd look at that name. I also like Ryan Kalkbrenner a lot out of Creighton, who's been in college for quite some time. I think a 3-time
he's married
conference defensive player
one of the only
year.
Married players.
He's an older guy, but that's fine to draft in the second round. Yeah. It's usually in the first round where you don't want to draft some of the older players because, for instance, just to put it in perspective, I used to be one of these guys that didn't value youth nearly as much, but then you start to get into the money game of it. Cooper Flagg is a full year younger than fellow freshman VJ Edgecombe.
Yeah.
Like this time next year, he's going to be as old as the other youngest players in the draft. That's valuable, right? Yeah. From a contract perspective, from a growing into adulthood perspective, that stuff matters. So it doesn't matter as much when you're selecting a second round target in the 30s, somebody that's really good, who might be 23 or 24. They'll play a rookie scale contract in the second round up until 3 years from now, something like that. But that's still a useful basketball player. So Ryan Kalkbrenner, I really like. I think he might be just the best drop coverage defender at center in this draft class, and that includes Kon Knueppel, who's younger and a little bit more raw. But those are some of the reasons he's going to be drafted ahead of Kalkbrenner. I really like him. Those are the 2 second round targets I'd be looking to address.
Would you be? Does anybody strike you so much that you'd be willing to package those 2 picks and move back into the first round? You'd probably take something else too. But
Reynaud.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be the guy. If it secured you, Kalkbrenner, like at 28, late in the first round, but not too many picks that you're moving up, okay, I'd rather just go get that guy. I don't think that they're gonna make every single selection, but I've always been a more bites at the apple type of guy. It just math reasons, nerd reasons. Hey, let's take a swing on 2 players where one of them might hit, and we'll see how it all plays out in summer league and training camp. And so if they wanted to use both of those picks, then that wouldn't be a bad idea. I actually quite like it. But if you wanted to go zero in on one of those centers that I'm talking about, I think either one. I think it would take more to go get Raynaud. But either one, if you felt like those were your guys, I wouldn't mind packaging both of those picks and moving up at all.
All right, Walker Mehl does this thing every single day on Locked On Hornets with our guy Doug Branson, who will join us on draft night as well. So Spotify, YouTube, where else can folks find you?
Wherever you get them, wherever you get your podcast. Yep, Locked On Hornets.
Yep. All right, yeah, have fun with it, and we had fun with you today, Walker. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right, again, our WCNC Plus draft special tips off live Wednesday night at 7 o'clock ahead of the first round. We'll see you then.